how you got into then this very distinctive way of decorating your pots.
Yes.
Yeah, and because the techniques and
Yeah.
obviously the pre-firing and everything, but then painting them. That's what led to that, was it, basically?
That's exactly what, it was marvellous because it gave me that freedom, because actually I'd been to Oxford, so I knew I'd been taught to draw and paint, and I knew my craft, whereas with pots I didn't, but I could apply all the decorative side and even actual sculpture and things to what I wanted to make. So I knew, because obviously I was tremendously informed by the Avebury experience, so I knew I wanted to make very thin pots, and I wanted to make them beaker-shaped at that stage, and I wanted to paint on them. So I knew those things, and gradually I began to form what I wanted to paint. But it was all very slow, so it started with patterns. And that was another thing. It was very new to me, making patterns, because it wasn't a thing that had been included, particularly in my work. Maybe if I'd been doing an interior, there had been a rug or something, and I'd enjoyed doing that. But it hadn't occurred to me that the pattern itself was an absolutely fabulous thing. And because of needing to do something on the pots, I started developing the patterns because I've always, with the pots, worked from drawing, so I do absolutely everything on paper before I start work. So I'll take my subject matter and I'll do a big watercolour. So the patterns came from the subject I'd chosen. And then gradually I really enjoyed those. And so the pots were patterned, as you'll see with the ones in the case. But after a bit I suddenly thought, actually, wouldn't animals be quite stupid, me? I mean, I must have been so ignorant about it. Because people have been painting animals on pots for years, and particularly the Etruscans. And I did go and see the Etruscan pots in Italy, actually, a couple of years later. But so I started looking at animals and drawing and painting them in sketchbooks, but from my imagination. So actually, they're rather weird, my early pots with animals, because they don't really look quite like animals. I think I did a crocodile pot because I was terribly excited about Crocodile Dundee, the message, and I know looking back, the crocodile didn't look at all like a crocodile actually, but you know, they were very quick and fast and loose, like so many people are. But anyway, and gradually I got very interested in the animals themselves and drawing properly. So I spent a lot of time, and still do, drawing from life, going either to zoos or just out, if it's dogs and things, I can go draw dogs. And then painting big watercolours from the drawings that I did, the sketches. And then working from the sketches. And actually the reason for this sort of elaboration on the whole thing is that patterns were fine on pots. It was a dog really. But drawing figurative images on pots is not fun, because you have a curve to contend with. And so when you've got a pot shaped like that, which by now the pots were beginning to be shaped, I'd rather left my beaker pots, because it was fun. Everything was extraordinary. One was exploring all the time, taking it a bit further, maybe that, and trying this. And I found out after some effort I could begin to shape them, I could bring them in and do things. And then the form itself became very interesting. But when you've got a form that does that, and you're painting an animal, say, what was the one which had it just back there? Boxing hand. Thank you. So that's going to go across like that, but the pot's going to go in so very little space, and then out. It's difficult to explain. It's actually that the guy who does the maps, what's he called? Mercator's projection. He worked out how to put his maps onto globes. And of course, put them from a flat surface onto a globe. That's a totally different thing. And in your atlases at home that you had as a child, you'll see in the front page, you'll see a picture of the map in lots of segments, which is how when it is put together to be on a globe. And drawing a figurative image on a curve is like that. It's difficult, it's complicated. But so hence I make, from my studies, I work actually from my studies onto the pot, doing a measured drawing. So as you would all of you, when you do a life drawing or something, you do a measured drawing, not with tons of plumb lines and stuff like that, but even just, that sort of thing. That's what I do. So I ignore the fact it curves. So it's as if it doesn't curve. And I work from what I can see into the form. So quite much.
And when you paint the pots and then fire them, this doesn't always work out, does it?
That's good.
But often you
Yes.
never, and the firing process, they change as well, don't they?
Yeah,
So they're not the same. So
Yeah.
the freshly painted pot versus the fired pot.
Yes.
And then so there's a lot of jeopardy in what you do, isn't there?
Yeah. Big danger sign on, beware this activity, don't do it. You're absolutely right, Adrian. So going back, I found that Joanna's raw oxides were just the job, because actually you can paint with raw oxides on a pot. You can do washes. So if you imagine when you're doing a watercolour, it's washes, and then it's intense areas, and it's painting over, layering, it's doing all sorts of stuff on the paper. So you need a medium that's incredibly fluid and easy. And I discovered that actually the bought colours that are made in factories or whatever, how they're made, but you can't move, they don't do that. You get a wonderful range of colours, and some are really beautiful, but you don't get any movement. You can't play with them, you can't wash them or do stuff. But raw oxides you can. So basically they're raw metals from the earth, and they're nearly all black or brown. The green is copper, and the copper actually you get a bit of green look to them, but on the whole you're painting in monochrome. So I'm painting on a white surface in monochrome, and that would be all right if the range of oxides was not tonal. So they're all dense, but actually some of the densest, strongest ones, like say iron, for instance, is the colour of that. It actually is battleship iron, funnily enough, the oxide, but a very strong, very marvellous colour. But actually, when you fire it on a pot, it's the most febrile. It disappears. There's hardly anything on there unless you put it on really thickly. So any of you who are artists here, you'll know when you're working tonally, you have to. It's the most important thing. The whole tonal range. It affects every bit of painting. But with the pot, with oxides, you can't do that. So there's a lot of pigment. So I discovered that if I did lots of tests with lots of different oxides, I could make a huge range, and it got bigger and bigger as I went on. So for almost every pot, I would do a new tests for, refine it. So I make little tessellations of clay, so tiny little tiles, like mosaics really. And on those has to be every bit of information. So it has to be the clay I'm using, the glaze I'm using, the temperature of the firing. That's it. That's all written down. It's probably something else. Anyway, that's written down, the name of the oxide. And then, in order to give me a tonal resolution so that I can see from the test when I'm painting the pot, I do little stripes, starting very, very dark or the other way, and getting paler and paler. So it shows me what a thin wash of the oxide will do, and what a very strong one. So one mix, and I've then weighed and ground my different oxides I'm putting together to make the colour. And there are some in the installation. They will give me the tonal range of that colour. And you can actually paint a whole pot, one can. For instance, the Black Swan pot, which is probably somewhere, that is painted entirely in one mix of oxide, of cobalt, because it's blue, but using it in different grades of thin and thick. And it changes enough. Eventually, the pattern went from the outside into the inside, and now it coats it covers the inside of the pots. Because as I became more figurative in my painting on the pots, the pattern. There wasn't room for the pattern. You know, they started as sort of decorative things. I thought pots are decorative, and then when I realised they weren't, they could be anything you wanted. It sort of ended up on the corner of the pot, but then in fact, eventually it all went inside, and it's now an interior world of passion.
Yes. Exhibiting.
Yes.
So where did that start?
Oh,
I mean, I can tell you if you like.
Yes.
So you took 2 pots to the Olympia Fashion Week here, is what's noted,
that's
yes?
the beginning.
That's the beginning, yes.
I didn't. Thank you.
Georgina von Exdorf.
Yes, yes. So back to poverty and living with George and Jimmy and Martin. And they go off to Olympia Fashion Week. And they're going to set off. And then George says to me, oh, can we have a couple of your pots? Because it's quite nice to, you know, have some scarves hanging out of them, you know, cover them up completely, obviously. And, you know, it would be a good sort of prop. So I say, fine, yeah. So off they go. Bye. And they're going to be in London for a week. And Georgina rings me up the next day and says, now, Pats, we've just taken commissions for a huge amount of pots. We've sold all these pots for you. All our buyers wanted to buy the pots. So I said, what? She said, yep. So you've got to get working. You've got a huge lot of commissions to do of the salamander pot, which is in fact the beaker pot that's in the case downstairs. So this is actually brilliant once I got over my nerves about it, because they were going to go to, she said, they're all going to, our Italian buyers and our New York buyers and our American buyers. So it was very exciting, but I had to do it. But what it meant was that I had a whole year, because I was still very new at it all, being paid to learn how to do pots. So painting and doing it, and there they were, and I was learning all the time, and I was getting money for it. So that was great. So then, what happened next?
Next, Corku, does that help?
Yes.
Did you go there and...
I feel something happened in between. Did you get me to Corku? Oh, yeah. I know. So I was getting more confident with the stuff I was doing for the GVs. And meanwhile, this gallery, Corku had come to Salisbury. And everyone was very excited about it, because it was a problem. We've got a really good one now, the Banner Gallery, which has just started. That's a good gallery. But it was a good gallery, and it was sort of unheard of in Salisbury, really. And everybody started saying, you know, you're doing pots, why don't you take a pot there? But, you know, it was very good. It was a very good place, and I thought, oh, no, I don't think I can. Anyway, I was sort of doing the final pot for GB to send off, and it was a seal pot. Because I had begun to think that the pots, the animals and the pots, there was something about them that they could perhaps be saving animals, because they've got something about them that, I don't know. And so the awful disease had hit seals, actually, which I don't expect anybody's heard about, but it did happen. And they hadn't heard about it because they were all saved, because I did these seal pots. And I was sending them off abroad, because I was so lucky with having the GBs, because they had shipping, so they do all my shipping for me. So I was taking this big seal pot into Salisbury to take to GBs at Odstock, and I thought, maybe I'll risk it and go into Corku with this pot, because I was okay. So I go into Corku, and this rather grim man sitting up at the top, and Mr. Corku, and he said, I went in and I said, can I show you a pot? And he said, I'm too busy. I've just been up to Olympia or somewhere. No, not Olympia, but something. And so I sort of slunk out. And I got to the door and I thought, oh, that's a bit mean. Anyway, I was just getting to the door, and he obviously thought so too. He thought I'd been a bit mean. So he said, oh, look, all right. Go and get it then. So I go to the car and I get this huge box. Staggering this huge box, which he probably wasn't expecting. And then he opened the box, and it's great when you open a box and you've got a pot inside, because you look down into the pattern. So he wasn't expecting that. So I stole a march on him, because he was taken by surprise. He offered me a one-man show on the spot. So that was good because I then had a gallery to show the pots. But the second good thing that happened was that Lord Cranborne went to see the pots, and he liked them, and he commissioned me. And so getting commissions is terrific. And I was invited to tea with Charlie, and I went, and we talked about bluebells and deer and all the nice things in Cranborne. And then Robert, Robert said, would you like a tour of the house? So Charlie and I said, oh, yes, please. So we had a lovely tour of the house, and he spoke in French for ages, and we pretended we understood it. Nerve-wracking. And then then he said, would you like to see my pigs? And so, yes. Anyway, so we went out into the grounds, and there was a paddock, and I could see these two red wild boar in his paddock. I think, God, he's got wild boar, what's he doing? And we go up, and I said, God, we've got what? Red wild boar. I didn't know they came in red. And he said, no, Patricia, they're tambots. So I said, well, they're fabulous. I mean, they should go on the pot. And Robert said, oh, my pigs, yes, please. So it was very Lord Emsworth, and the pigs were getting on the pot. So that was great. So I made him a pig pot, which is actually now, because he's now the Marquis of Salisbury, and the pot's line Hatsworth. Hatfield
House.
Hatfield House,
yeah. Yeah, North of London.
I think that's what it is.
And he had a suggestion for you, didn't he?
Oh yes, and he's
Yeah.
Sorry, Parkinson, you're so good.
I know, just know where you're going with this. That's why I know where you're going with this. Anyway.
Second time. Yes, so anyway, so I bring him the pot. So I worked really hard on the pot, and it was lovely because actually he said, just spend the summer around the gardens and the house, because I obviously wanted to draw everything I could see there so that I could make a pot that told the story of the pigs and Cranborne Manor, which is the most beautiful, very early Tudor manor house. It's lovely. So I had a lovely summer, and the swifts, they had the swifts in the summer, so the swifts were sort of screaming around the tower there, and it was really jolly, so I spent ages, much longer than I needed to, drawing and so on. And when I brought it, and he was having a weekend party. It was very scary. They were all very, very grand, very scary. And I come in with my pot, and luckily it was okay, and they liked it. And then Robert said, "Now, have you thought about exhibiting in London?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I think you should." And I said, "I actually haven't a clue what gallery I should go to, because I'm making pots, but they're not domestic. And I don't know where they would fit, And he said, I think the Fine Arts Society would be the right place for you. So I then went up to London, and my elder daughter Siobhan drove me up, and we put a pot in the back of the car. It was a rather nice little hair pot with hairs bounding around it, and it had a very nice, it had the design that actually is on your pot, which is beautiful. I really like that. It's the only time I've done it, other than your pot. And when I arrived I had the same corker and corker treatment. I seem to attract that, actually. I think people don't think I'm serious or something. Bizarre. I went in, not with the pot, with photographs. And there were three directors standing there. And this beautiful gallery, it's such a lovely gallery. It's at the bottom of New Bond Street. It has, in mosaic at the front, it has Fine Arts Society 18 something or other, in mosaic, in there forever. And a very astonishing place, because they showed old masterworks, every kind of loveliness, all the decorative arts and crafts movement, silver, and I can never remember people's names, but all the famous makers of silver and pots and furniture. Anyway, so obviously I was coming, they obviously didn't want me, so, they didn't want someone off the road, so I come in with my photographs, and they said, there's absolutely no point showing us, actually, there's the door. And then I thought, actually, my Irish blood rose up, and I thought, no, actually, this is not good. So I thought I could have to bluff my way in here, I'm going to have to get in. So I said, well, actually, I was told to come here by Lord Cranborne. And they didn't look terribly impressed at that. So, so I thought, okay, got to go a bit further with this. So I thought, if I only had a name, if only he'd given me a name. So I said, he gave me a name. And they said, oh, what was it? And I, of course, hadn't got a name. So I plucked an initial out of the air and I said, it began with, oh, stupid, I can't remember, but it began with a P. And they said, oh, you mean Peyton Skipwith? So I said, yes.
But then you didn't look back, did you?
So they pointed me in his direction, and the rest is history. Anyway, he looked at my photographs and he laughed, and he thought they were funny, my early pots. And he liked them, and he said, had I got a pot? And I said, well, yes, I got one in the car. So I went, so he said, go and get it. So I had to walk past the other snooty directors and go out to the car, where Siobhan was waiting for me. And I put the pot in a box, but I hadn't got any string, so I tied it up with pink binder twine. So it didn't look very good. I had plaited it, so it made it very pretty. Anyway, I take it back down, and Peyton next box, and then he likes the pot and calls down the other directors, and then he says, can I cut visit your studio? So that was progress and great. So a few weeks later, Peyton didn't drive, he came down by train and then I think taxi to the studio, and he came upstairs to the painting studio where I got the pots of my paintings, and he stood at the end and he didn't say a word. And I thought, oh my God, he can see it's rubbish and he doesn't know what to say, and he's come all this way, and I felt so embarrassed. So I talked too much immediately, and I talked about Edward Borden, because I'd been staying with Charlotte in Staffordshire. We'd bought a Borden book, and I adore Edward Borden, and I was shown him at art school by Peter Lindley, my print tutor, and I've always adored his work. And so I gabbled on about Edward Borden, and eventually Peyton said, yes, Patricia, yes. Well, we thought we'd have your first show with Edward Borden's memorial show, actually. So I nearly died. I nearly fainted. It was amazing. So they were going to give me a show, a one-man show, and with Edward Borden. Amazing.
And this then led to some really impressive commissions.
Yes, it did. It did.
Start name checking now.
Yeah, and then naming it. Well, actually, the first pot I sold at this show was that was wonderful, because it went to Castle Cool in Ireland, and being half Irish, I was especially pleased. And it's a lovely castle, and it's a private museum. And there were other good commissions. I had a bit later actually, but a lovely commission from Omar Koch, who has a private museum in Istanbul, and he'd been to my show and he wanted me to paint rhinos, a rhino pot. He wanted a rhino pot because he's a wonderful man, he's trying to save the rhinos, and I love rhinos and want to save them, so that was really good. And so lots of pots in my private collections and private museums, and so all over the world, which is good. So that was good. What comes next?
Of all the things you've done, I'm throwing a question in there, this is a curveball. What's your favourite? Dare I ask? It's a boring question, but I have to ask it.
Favourite pot?
Yeah.
Actually, I've got several. I do have a pot that belongs to someone here, not very far away from me, which is a very favourite pot. And I did that, I think, quite soon after the pig pot, because I know I did the wonderful floor that's at Cranbourne Manor. It has this lovely big black and white square marble floor, that lovely houses have. And I did that in the interior. It was rather nice. And it was Long Dogs, which I'd started drawing quite early on, actually. And in fact, the Castle Cool pot was Long Dogs, but a different, very big pot. The fox pots I like very much, actually, which again, someone here's got a big fox pot, which I'm very fond of. We're never going to come to the one I want to talk about. Yes, I have got a few, actually, the big ones. I've got two at home, only two left. Only two left!
Let's come and see Patricia at the end.
Yes, I mean, And one is a wild boar. Oh, it's the wild boar story. That was fun.
Go for that one.
So Robert's part was termite pigs, which I thought were wild boars, but I had always wanted to do a wild boar part. So eventually I discovered where I could draw wild boars, and there's a place there's a forest in Devon, in Coleridge's birthplace, Tarbarry. Somebody will know what it's called, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It's Coleridge, that's the important thing. And there's this forest full of wild boars, which actually I'm afraid of eating, but nevertheless they have had a life, I think. So I got permission to go into this forest and draw the boars, and it's a huge bare forest. It's just pine trees. It's grim actually, but and there's a pathway through the middle where you can walk, and there are wild boars in sort of their own little bits all the way along. Completely unsafe because there's nothing really between you and the wild boar. A little bit of one, but I mean basically so I get into this big forest and I'm all on my own, and there are all these huge wild boars, and there are mummy boars with baby boars and things like that. But I'm not frightened, and do you know why?
Tell me.
Because pigs love big draw. They absolutely love it. And so I whipped out my sketchbook, my pencil, and then they were all looking a bit sort of, very, I'm dangerous, we're dangerous. And I got out my drawing when I started, and they went, oh, okay.
They sounded quite clever, aren't they? So they knew exactly what you were doing. Thinking, we're going to end up on a park.
We know where this is going to end. To one another, and she's going to choose me. I'm going to so then spent the day drawing the boars, which were all sort of skipping around and having baths in mud and saying, "What do you think about this?" And it's very good. So that part is at home.
Okay. Shall we open it to the floor now? Shall we see if anyone's got any questions?
Yes.
Yes? Is anyone got any questions
Why not?
to ask Patricia? It's not obligatory. Or maybe one of the things you discover in this room in the winter, if you're sitting here too long, it gets rather cold. No questions for anyone? Oh!
How big is the biggest pot you've ever made?
I think the biggest pot actually is the turtle pot, which is still in my manor. It's so big, it's about that big.
Is it off of the table, that big,
yes.
or from the floor?
Yeah, no, not from the floor. It's probably about that big. Actually.
I think they're bigger than that. I think the big ones are big. I wanted to ask, you talked about at the beginning that you were drawing from imagination, and you talked about the crocodiles.
Mm.
At what point did you decide to start drawing from life and draw the animals from life? And how did you do that? Was that in observing the animals themselves, or from books? Or
Actually, that's a brilliant question because I know exactly the moment. It was, I went to dinner with Jonathan Tetley, the Tetleys. And they had two Lutcher dogs, and it was summer, and there was a big fireplace, and there was a great big bowl of roses, I think, or flowers in the fireplace. And while we were having dinner, I couldn't help noticing these dogs going up to the pot of flowers and sniffing them and enjoying them. And it was so sweet and entrancing. And of course, long dogs are beautiful shapes to draw. I mean, they're an absolute gift, aren't they? They're so elegant and glorious. And I was watching them doing that and just watching them, and I thought, oh, God, I've got to draw them. So I said to the Tetleys, can I come back tomorrow and draw the long dogs? And spent a lovely day doing that. And of course, that then led to drawing from life, and it was going to go on a pot because of what I'd seen. And that's how it started. Really. That's how it started. I mean, it was edging, it was going to edge, it was going to go that way. But it's always so nice actually in life when you the way things develop and how it goes on growing. Actually, it's never boring because there's always more to it, isn't there?
Patricia, could I ask? There's There's a word that keeps coming to my mind as I was listening to you speaking. That's alchemy, the transformation of matter into something extraordinary and communicative.
There was a yes. Every single firing is a nightmare of waiting to see. It's going to be anything like one thought it would be, and so on. And it actually never is, because you can't really judge how it will be, because they change so dramatically with the firing. And I'm working all the time. When I work, I have a trolley and I have the test there, and I have the little dish with the black stuff in it there, so I know what it could do, and I'm sort of imagining it like that. But this particular time, I was doing another little owl. I love little owls. I absolutely love them. I've only I think done 3 little owl pots, but I sort of keep drawing them. And this one, I'd achieved some really nice browns, because they're very brown little owls, and there's a great complication of feathers and pattern. And I'd got a boyfriend at the time who used to come and sit and watch me coiling and making, and that was all very satisfying and nice. And so while I was doing this plot, he was coming out to the studio and watching things, and I kept saying, this is going to be the most glorious range of browns. I'm getting a richness of browns here that's so beautiful. And because he was around, he was there at what we potters call the birthing. The birthing of the pot, which actually means you open the kiln. Actually, it's a really horrible term, I don't like it at all. So I said he could be present at the birthing, and massive anticipation, open the kiln door, and there's the little owl pot, and it's bright blue. It was a dark blue. I'd mixed up my oxides. I got it terribly wrong. And he sort of went absolutely white and was totally upset about it. And I looked at it for a bit, and then I said, yes, I think nocturnal owl. I I should have said something about Tim Beddoe, actually. I don't think they came, they were going to come, but Tim Beddoe, originally, he was the first person to photograph me and put me in a magazine. I met him in a party in Tippett, which is like 4 houses, but there was a party. And I went, and this gorgeous, tall, lanky man, and I talked for ages. And I of course told him all about my plots, because I've just started doing them really. And he said, I'd love to come and see them or something. And I said, well, it's across the road actually. And the next day he came and he said, what are you doing about publicity? And we went to the studio. And I said, oh, publicity, God, no, I haven't, what? No, I haven't done anything about that. And he said, well, I'd like to put you in a museum. No, he didn't say that. Probably not.
Put you in a magazine, is that what you do? No, I'm in a museum.
Yeah. Ultimately, I'm definitely going to be cremated and have my ashes put in the V&A, so I can have...
In a pot. That's a good plan.
It is. So Tim then said he'd like to do an article for Country Living. So that was the first magazine I was ever in.
I wondered if you tell those who don't know just how long it takes you to make one of these beautiful works of art.
Oh, David, thank you for asking that, actually, because that's they take forever. They do take such a long time, partly because of so many... there's so much to it. So the from its inception, from the drawing, and then the painting, but the actual carrying out the painting is very lengthy, because I'm really painting the same way that I paint my watercolours on paper, with the same amount of. So when you see when there are some watercolours, or the watercolours that are in the case downstairs, there's 2 owl paintings. I'm very fascinated by detail, perhaps too much actually, but so all that's going on to aids going on to curved surface, and then there's the pattern inside. Building is not too bad, actually. Building a big pot, I think I could do in 2 or 3 weeks, 2 weeks perhaps. But the painting does take a really long time, and then when you keep doing it, you're not sure. Obviously, you're not sure about the oxides basically. So there's a lot of that goes on, and it is in the end it is months, which is annoying because it means my output is very small. And I mean, I would probably do only 2 big pots in a year. I mean, the smaller pots probably would be a couple of months even so. But I've got to get faster.